I was just told, sorry, that we stopped streaming again. I tell you, I obviously have an internet problem, and we are working as fast as we can to fix this. So, hopefully you heard the entire show of the audit in Texas, but the link is going to be on the first half of the show, so that you'll be able to follow that if you missed some things. I want to point out that in the Texas audit clip that we saw, I'm already being contacted by people who have sent an OCC complaint to Wells Fargo, and Wells Fargo calls them back and says, I don't know who you are, even though the owner has a loan payment. And she says, well, I make my payments to you, so you own my note. And they said, no, we have no record of it. It is completely messed up, and the people are going to win. We're going to win. I also wanted to point out here real quickly to show you what they were talking about in the preliminary title policy exceptions. This is the preliminary title report that you get, the people, owners, and then of course the agents see it too. I'm just showing you one that comes from a transaction that I was sort of involved in for a while. And what they were talking about in the Texas audit clip is the exceptions. And so down here on page 11 on this standard title report, they start talking about exclusions from coverage, which goes on, believe it or not, for 8 pages. And they are excluding everything they can possibly dream up. And they go on, and I wanted to point out here on this particular page, on this particular preliminary title report, any claim which arises out of the transaction creating the interest of the mortgagee insured by this policy by reason of the operation of federal bankruptcy, state insolvency, or similar creditors' rights laws that is based on the transaction creating the interest of the insured mortgagee being deemed a fraudulent conveyance or fraudulent transfer. Okay, they covered themselves for MERS. So they're not saying specifically that if everything, if MERS is involved, but as this proof is coming out in courts that MERS is allowing fraudulent transfers, trust me, if you've bought a property that had a MERS loan on it, and then you go to sell it, when you go to the title company to transfer the title, if there's any claims because of this, you won't be able to get a title policy. And this is an exception. This is the problem. The people are always stuck. We're always the last ones and on the hook for everything. And I'm getting really upset about it. So I wanted to point that out to you. Now, we just need to keep our eyes on what's happening in the federal government. Geithner is stepping down as Treasury. And I thought this was a pretty clever, short little video. Listen to this. If you want to get enraged, listen to this one.
Our mover and shaker this morning is outgoing Treasury Secretary Tim Geithner. Today is his last day on the job. Geithner is the most senior economic official who is still left on President Barack Obama's team after the financial crisis. He leaves the economy in much better shape than when he first took the helm. During his tenure, Geithner oversaw the Troubled Asset Relief Program, otherwise known as TARP, pushed through an overhaul of Wall Street's rules, and also negotiated with congressional leaders on the budget and the debt limit. The president has selected White House Chief of Staff Jack Lew to replace Geithner. Lew is currently waiting for Senate approval. Geithner, who is also a former president of the New York Fed, has not said what his next career move will be. Is there perhaps a book in the works?
Okay. There you've got mainstream media spin. TARP, yeah, where all the funds for the homeowners are still sitting in some bank account, not in people's pockets. Here's a couple of articles that I'm going to be linking. Filling Geithner's small shoes. The inconvenient truth about Jack Lew. So here's the point. Are we going from the frying pan to the fire? What is going on? And here to explain it in better words than I could ever come up with is Democracy Now! And William K. Black.
This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman.
And I'm Juan Gonzalez. Welcome to all of our listeners and viewers around the country and around the world. President Obama is facing criticism for nominating another former Wall Street executive to become Treasury Secretary. On Thursday, Obama tapped his own Chief of Staff, Jack Lew, to replace Timothy Geithner. Lew was an executive at Citigroup from 2006 to 2008 at the time of the financial crisis. He served as Chief Operating Officer of Citigroup's Alternative Investments Unit, a group that bet on the housing market to collapse. Lew has also long pushed for the deregulation of Wall Street. From 1998 to January 2001, he headed the Office of Management and Budget under President Clinton. During that time, Clinton signed into law two key laws to deregulate Wall Street: the Financial Services Modernization Act of 1999 and the Commodity Futures Modernization Act of 2000. On Thursday, independent Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont criticized Lew's nomination, saying, quote, "We don't need a Treasury Secretary who thinks that Wall Street deregulation was not responsible for the financial crisis." At a press conference at the White House Thursday, President Obama praised Jack Lew's record.
Jack has the distinction of having worked and succeeded in some of the toughest jobs in Washington and the private sector. As a congressional staffer in the 1980s, he helped negotiate the deal between President Reagan and Tip O'Neill to save Social Security. Under President Clinton, he presided over 3 budget surpluses in a row. So for all the talk out there about deficit reduction, making sure our books are balanced, this is the guy who did it 3 times. He helped oversee one of our nation's finest universities and one of our largest investment banks. In my administration, he's managed operations for the State Department and the budget for the entire executive branch. And over the past year, I've sought Jack's advice on virtually every decision that I've made, from economic policy to foreign policy.
For more on the nomination of Jack Lew, as well as other news about Wall Street, we're joined by 2 guests. William Black, author of The Best Way to Rob a Bank is to Own One. He's Associate Professor of Economics and Law at the University of Missouri, Kansas City, former senior financial regulator. His recent article for the Huffington Post is called Jacob Lew, Another Brick in the Wall Street on the Potomac. We're also joined by Matt Taibbi, contributing editor for Rolling Stone magazine. His latest piece, Secrets and Lies of the Bailout, which we'll talk about in a bit. Author of Griftopia, a story of bankers, politicians, and the most audacious power grab in American history. We welcome you both to Democracy Now! Professor Black, let's start with you. Your assessment of Jack Lew.
Well, on financial matters, Jack Lew has been a failure of pretty epic proportions, and he gets promoted precisely because he is willing to be a failure and is so useful to Wall Street interests. So you've mentioned 2 of the things in terms of the most important and most destructive deregulation under President Clinton by statute. But he was also there for much of the deregulation by rule, and a strong proponent of it. And he was there for much of the cutting of staff. For example, the FDIC, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, lost 3/4 of its staff, and that huge loss began under Clinton. And the whole reinventing government, Lew was a strong supporter of that. And, for example, we were taught, instructed by Washington, that we were to refer to banks as our clients in our role as regulators and to think of them as clients. He goes from there to Wall Street, where he was a complete failure. You noted that part of what Citicorp did was bet that housing would fall. That was actually one of their winning bets. But they actually made a bunch of losing bets as well. And the unit that he was heading would have not been permissible but for the deregulation of getting rid of Glass-Steagall under President Clinton. And you saw, as an example of Citicorp, why we shouldn't be doing this. Why would we create a federal subsidy where all of us, through the U.S. government, are on the hook for Citicorp's gambling on financial derivatives for its own account? Running a casino operation. That makes absolutely no public policy sense. Then he comes into the Obama administration, and he was disastrously wrong. He tried very hard to impose austerity on the United States back in 2011. Which is, he wanted, the European strategy, which has pushed the Eurozone back into recession, and Spain, Greece, and Italy into Great Depression levels of unemployment. And this is the guy, after all of these failures, who also is intellectually dishonest. He will not own up to his role and deregulation's role and desupervision's role in producing this crisis, and not just this crisis, but the Enron-era crisis and the savings and loan debacle.
Matt Taibbi, your reaction to the nomination of Jack Lew by President Obama?
I think there's a couple of things. I agree with everything that Professor Black said. I think it's the symbolism of this choice is, I think, very important for people. Just the mere fact of picking somebody from Citigroup and from that same Bob Rubin nexus that Timothy Geithner came from. And you heard Barack Obama, as he's introducing Jack Lew, praising Tim Geithner as somebody who's going to go down in history as one of the great Treasury secretaries of all time. I think what this tells everybody is that Jack Lew is going to represent absolute continuity with the previous Treasury secretary, who had a very specific agenda when it came to Wall Street. And I think we're just going to expect more of the same really being overt and covert support of these too big to fail institutions that Lew worked for, Citigroup being the worst and most disastrous example of that kind of company. So I think it's the choice of somebody from that particular firm is fraught with pretty upsetting symbolism for the country, I think.
I want to go back to 2010 when Jack Lew appeared before the Senate Budget Committee for a confirmation hearing after he was nominated by President Obama to head the Office of Management and Budget. During the hearing, he was questioned by Senator Bernie Sanders.
Do you believe that the deregulation of Wall Street pushed by people like Alan Greenspan, Robert Rubin, contributed significantly to the disaster we saw on Wall Street several years ago?
Senator, as when we discussed, I mentioned to you, I don't consider myself an expert in some of these aspects of the financial industry. My experience in the financial industry has been as a manager, not as an investment advisor. My sense is, as someone who has generally been familiar with these trends, is that the problems in the financial industry preceded deregulation. There was an increasing emphasis on highly abstract leveraged derivative products that got us to the point that in the period of time leading up to the financial crisis, risks were taken, they weren't fully embraced, they weren't well understood. I don't personally know the extent to which deregulation drove it, but I don't believe that deregulation was the proximate cause. I would defer to others who are more expert about the industry to try and parse it better than that.
That's Jack Lew responding to Bernie Sanders, who, when President Obama announced his nomination of Treasury Secretary, to Treasury Secretary of Jack Lew, Senator Sanders said, "We don't need a Treasury Secretary who thinks that Wall Street deregulation was not responsible for the financial crisis." Professor Black.
Well, I mean, we can agree that he lacks expertise in the area, but he was supposed to have expertise. This was supposed to be his area of expertise, both in his role as OMB head under Clinton, and then, of course, as being in the industry and actually implementing the fruits of this deregulation. So he has the history, in one sense, correct. He says the problem arose before deregulation. That's true that derivatives were already a problem before deregulation, and so Brooksley Born proposes to deal with the problem by having a regulation to deal with credit default swaps. And then the Clinton administration, in league with Greenspan, in league with Phil Gramm, and with one of the important architects of all of this being Jack Lew, squashes Brooksley Born to destroy destroy the proposed regulation and to pass something, the Commodities Future Modernization Act, talk about a dishonest phrase, that not only said, you, Brooksley Born, cannot go forward with this particular regulation, the statute actually said, we hereby withdraw all regulatory powers to protect the nation, period, from the federal government, from the state and local government. We exempt you from the gambling laws. We exempt you from the boiler room laws to prevent fraudulent operations. It's one of the most extraordinary abusive things in the world, heavily involved with AIG's ability to produce not just the disaster at AIG, but the disaster of credit of the CDOs that blew up a larger portion of the world, and those CDOs would not have been possible without these credit default swaps. So this is a guy who designed the disaster, participated in the disaster on Wall Street, was made rich by it. We haven't talked about the fact that he got huge bonus for helping to destroy the world at Citicorp, and he got it through the bailout of Citicorp by the U.S. government. So he produces disaster, profits from the disaster, we pay him bonuses for causing the disaster, and then we have the absurdity of the President of the United States saying that this is a man with a track record of unmitigated success. It is exactly the opposite in terms of finance. He is a worthy successor to Tim Geithner in that he has screwed up everything substantively he has ever touched.
William Black, I'd like to ask you about another aspect of Lou's portfolio. His stance on austerity. You've raised questions in terms of his continued support of austerity measures as opposed to efforts by the government to stimulate the economy. Could you talk about that?
Yeah, and this is an irony as well in terms of the political aspects and Obama. So under Lou, in his new incarnation a while back as OMB head for Obama, I have a piece that talks about how OMB under Obama sounds almost exactly like the Tea Party. So it adopts all of their rubric about, these terrible social programs, these terrible safety net, and how it's going to imperil our nation. And what we need to do is be balancing the budget. In other words, austerity. Now, had Obama succeeded in following Lou's recommendation in July 2011, when they were trying to negotiate the so-called grand bargain, which is really the grand betrayal of the safety net. Unemployment in July 2011 was 9.1%. Austerity in the United States would have done just what it did in Europe. Unemployment would have surged. So all through 2012, the election year, unemployment would have been going up well above 10%, quite possibly into the 11 and 12% range, which is where it is in Europe. Obama would have been toast. There would have been no chance. He would have been crushed in the election. The Democrats would have lost control of the Senate and such. And these folks, even today, are claiming that the failure to achieve the grand betrayal and to cut the safety net is their great disappointment. So they not only tried to destroy themselves and the country, they are continuing to do that, and indeed, but for Harry Reid literally throwing the Obama administration's suggestion that they do cuts to the safety net in the fireplace and burning it up, they would have gotten it as part of this interim austerity deal that was just done about 8 days ago.
We're going to break.
This is the truth, and we've said this before, and it is the same, and it doesn't matter whether the representatives have D or R after their name. It doesn't matter. Please, let's get those initials out of our thinking. What matters is, are they for the people or are they for the banks? We're going to talk tomorrow. There's a couple of senators, I believe they are, representatives. One's D, one's R. They're working against the banks. So here's the point, whether they're an independent or a Democrat or a Republican or not yet voted in, what the people need to do, what we must do, is organize and explain to as many owners in the nation as possible that what the owners need to do is organize and get owner representation. We need true people representation at the government level. Now, this is what we're up against. Now you see it, and that's okay. We need to know. No sugarcoating on what we're facing, but we can make a difference, and we've gotten some help. So I want to bring to your attention, Anonymous has done a little video. I'm not going to play the video. You can watch it if you like. But they referred us to this particular page, and this page is very, very important because it details, from Anonymous viewpoint, Bank of America fraud. And this is just more fuel to the fire. The facts are these. The fraud is coming out. We heard from Mary just this morning how they have, in a foreclosure judgment, house is trying to be foreclosed, B of A is trying to take the house in foreclosure, and how they have drafted all of these problems. It's exactly what we're talking about here on the notary complaint page and the OCC complaint page. And I want to talk about how we can mail those out, and it will persuade our attorney generals. So go to this Bank of America fraud page from Anonymous. It's very long. It scrolls down. It's basically telling the world and everybody with a B of A loan, they focused on B of A, but that they are fraudulent, that they do not work, that it is a conspiracy with the other banks. B of A devised a fraudulent scheme where it has MERS execute an assignment that appears to be on behalf of a lender, which assigns the loan to either Bank of New York Mellon, Deutsche Bank, or U.S. Bank NT. Then once that fraudulent assignment is recorded, that conspirator bank attaches it to the foreclosure proceedings to defraud the court into believing it is a true owner of the loan. This is how they're doing it. And we're going to talk a little bit more tomorrow about that umbrella of fraud that MERS is. I've now got in writing from MERS, from one of my contacts sent that to us. We'll discuss it tomorrow. And that is a MERS certifying officer is at the same time an employee of the bank that has taken the house. So if it's if the assignment says MERS and it's some guy, Ben Peck, there's one that I know is MERS off the top of my head, then next, that he, at that time when he's operating for MERS and giving that assignment, that property to Bank of America, he's working for Bank of America. This is outright fraudulent theft, and this is the kind of proof that the people are going to be getting. So go to this website, Anonymous website, and I wanted to scroll down here at the end because down here there's comments. And so when I read this yesterday, I commented because at the end of the article, Anonymous is saying, if after reading this you feel as outraged as you do helpless, there are at least two small things you can do. You can get online and send emails to Bank of America to let them they're fraud and insist that they stop. Ooh, that's going to be helpful. But it's something. It's something. The second thing that Anonymous is suggesting is to send emails to the U.S. District Court, Central District of California, and demand that it stop allowing Bank of America to commit this foreclosure fraud. And so I went down to the comment sections, and I'm going to recommend that you do too. If every one of us and everybody we know goes into the comment sections and says this, then everybody reading it has a more higher likelihood of going to Homeowners for Justice, go to the website. So that's what I said. Hey, there's 3 things owners can do. They're all at the Homeowner for Justice website. So just go to hofj.org, file a notary complaint, follow the instructions. File a OCC complaint, follow the instructions. And then as soon as we get them up there, file an owner's affidavit. and then send this information out to the planet. If we can get everybody that's looking at the anonymous B of A fraud to start reading down through these comments, and we have enough comments down there saying the same thing, go to hofj.org and file, and follow the instructions, because then the people, we're building this case. So that's a suggestion that I've got. I also wanted to point out that I had some folks from Marin that said that they wanted to send out some information. So I'm going to show the Homeowner for Justice flyer that I generated for Marin County, and it's linked at the website. So even if it's not very clear, I was shooting at a lower resolution today, hoping I wouldn't blow up live stream. So anyway, hopefully you can go to the website and see, and this would be mailed out to owners. And over here under Did You Know, I've written, did you know that banks must forge documents to foreclose securitized loans? Did you know that recently the founder of a Florida foreclosure mill pled guilty to forging foreclosure documents recorded and used to foreclose across the nation? And then did you know independent audits find that 84% of foreclosures violate at least one California law, with most foreclosures violating multiple laws? And this is specifically to Marin County. So I had a picture of Marin County, the foreclosures, auctions that are being faced right now, 344 auctions right in wealthy Marin, people facing the loss of their home. Trust me, they're contacting me, several are, and they're just screaming because they're getting the same runaround, the same lies, the same forged documents, and the same theft, just at a bigger scale, because their properties are cost more. And down here under hofj.org, Standing Against Foreclosure, join us, fight fraud, keep your home, OCC and AG complaints. My idea is that a homeowner facing auction will read this, will go to the website, read those pages, the notary complaint, read the suspicious signatures page, look at the legal action going on by state, and that we can tell them that they're not alone. We're here because we are. We want them to join our effort, because united we have so much more clout than divided, where they just chew us up one by one. And then, of course, at the bottom, sorry, I shouldn't have scrolled over there. It says weekdays live from 10 to 11 PST. Follow the live stream. So that's something that I can make for you. If you want to send out some flyers to people in your county, just let me know. It's particularly in California, Nevada, Washington, Oregon, Arizona, California, those 5 states. And then, as we close up for today, I want to show you, it's also linked on the website. This is a response of filer who sent a copy of the OCC complaint to Kamala Harris, the Attorney General. And this is the letter from the office. And I've highlighted the specific point because it says, thank you for contacting us, blah, blah, blah. But the specific issue is complaints often bring early warning of what promises to be a pervasive scheme or systematic violation of California law. If a pattern is discovered, what originated as a private dispute may become a matter of broad public interest and thus warrant intervention by our office under California consumer protection laws. So I leave with you today, let us turn this systemic fraud into a pattern that they can discover. And once the people let the attorney generals in every state understand that we've discovered this, you go do your job, and then we're going to try to find those other statutes that Mary talked about the first on the show. If you don't do your job and you know there's something wrong, then we're going to hold you liable too. So, power to the people. We are gaining steam. Things are changing and moving. We can't lose the edge that we're starting to get. Let's get everybody we possibly can to join us, to do these complaints, to send them out to the planet, to solidify our position so that the elected officials will stop the fraudulent foreclosures. We got to stop the machine. Once you stop the machine, and I know, in that Texas audit, the recorder's sort of looking around going, okay, you can go to the DA. She's not real sure. Okay, you got something really on a big mess on your property. What are you going to do about it? And I've been saying, the first thing we have to do is stop. Stop the foreclosures. Stop the theft. Stop this. Let the people keep their homes. Then we will focus, as this organization will focus on what we need to do and how we're going to get clouded titles cleared, loans modified, keep people in their homes, restitution for those that lost. Thank you. This is CJ Holmes, founder of Homeowners for Justice, signing off for today, and we'll see you tomorrow.